We are in St. Louis, and we are coming up on what I'm going to say is an epic cemetery. Bellefontaine, I'm sure many of you heard about it, especially if you're from this area. It has some amazing graves and sculptures, probably like no other that you can compare, but we're actually going to be seeing somebody today in the Civil War era. And we go through the gates, and we are in. It's a gray, rainy day here at this epic cemetery in St. Louis. And by the way, that is how it's pronounced, the French way. I talked to the people here. Bellefontaine, not Bellefontaine, but whatever you like. But I'll tell you what I like is this is epic. Look at these stones. Now, there are a lot of famous people here. A lot, and some amazing funerary architecture, but it would take weeks, if not months, to cover a lot of it, and we'll see about coming back here for sure. But today we're going to focus on a mad doctor, kind of like the Marilla story, grave robbing, anatomists, resurrectionists back in those days. Joseph McDowell was born April 1st, 1805. April Fool's Day? Maybe. He was born in Lexington, Kentucky, to a Major John McDowell and his wife Lucy. That same Major John McDowell who crossed the Delaware with George Washington during the Revolutionary War. But it would be his uncle Ephraim McDowell who would influence young Joseph. Ephraim was a doctor, and he employed these things we were talking about in his repertoire. Now, Ephraim, when he became a doctor, he got a lot of notoriety. One is that he removed the tumor, probably the biggest tumor ever, 22 pounds from a patient. And everyone was talking about him. And also, before President Polk was president, he was operating on him too. So he was kind of well known. But he was into this dissection and the bodies in the early 1800s, and he actually learned the trade traveling to Edinburgh, Scotland, which I'm going to call the world capital for resurrectionists. We know Burke and Hare. Many of you know that story. The evil guys, they wouldn't wait for people to die. They would murder people. And he learned from the best. Actually, they called that getting burked. Get murdered for your body. Ephraim studied under a Dr. Bell, who, by the way, was one of the inspirations for the figure of Sherlock Holmes. So he was learning a lot from his uncle. As Joseph got older, he was working in Kentucky. He had worked in Philadelphia, Ohio, at various medical facilities. And he did a lot of studies at Transylvania University in Kentucky. Now, he first came here to St. Louis in 1939. And since he was already doing this, and his uncle, his reputation had preceded him here. And he would waste no time in practicing grave robbing with his Uncle Ephraim. during those years. Now, what's interesting is Joseph decided that he wanted to marry one of his cousins, and I guess that was common in those days, and it happened to be Ephraim's daughter. And he went to Ephraim and Uncle Ephraim, I want to marry her, I want to marry her. And Ephraim's like, well, she can make up her own mind. Oh, come on, you can force her. No, no, no. Well, she didn't want to marry him, and that really made Joseph mad, so that's where they kind of had their split. He eventually married his new mentor's assistant. His new mentor was Dr. Daniel Drake, and her name was Amanda. And that's when he started practicing on his own. And he continued to rob graves here as he had before. And it really all started in this resurrectionist. He started actually at Kemper College, and he was seen as a great surgeon, a great man, a physician, a teacher, but he was also seen as a disturbed individual. I mean, wouldn't you? He'd be the talk of the town. Where it really started getting intense was, of course, as many losing his children young from epidemics, diseases, he would have them placed in glass coffins and preserved in alcohol with a tight seal, kind of like the lady in red we saw in a previous episode. I guess they did that from time to time. He was developing this weird reputation, and he was actually very volatile. He was an alcoholic. He was kind of one of those controlled alcoholics, as they call it, and he would give these temperance speeches to against whoever he was mad at, which usually included immigrants like Germans or religions like the Catholics. So he was making waves. He was a member of this organization. It was an organization back then called the Know Nothings, they kind of considered themselves purists. You know, they were direct descendants from the colonists, settlers. In 1840, he founded Missouri's first medical school, Missouri Medical College, and in 1847 was the year that he bought this, what I'm going to say, an infamous cave. Now today the cave, you can go to the cave. It was what inspired Mark Twain in his book, The Mississippi, Life on the Mississippi. And it was there that he stockpiled all of these guns. I think he had up to 500 small arms ammunition in there. And it is also a cave where he took one of his daughters, and he put her in a copper canister and preserved her. And the kids would come, including Mark Twain, probably. It's what inspired his book, to open the top and have a look at the body. They would pull her head out of the alcohol, kind of to have a look at her dead gazing eyes. That was kind of the rite of passage for the kids, I guess, in those days. Very eerie. He believed that these techniques would allow communication between himself and his daughter. And the people here, the people in Hannibal, they soon discovered this, and they really didn't like it. They forced him to remove her and bury her somewhere else. Now, there was this Indian mound, and it was where he had buried them. And it would turn out to be the place that his wife and his mother and other children would all be buried. And the mound was on the outskirts of the ancient Mississippian city of Cahokia, nearby here. The burial mound was visible from the college. He would stand up in the tower with a telescope and keep like a vigil. He would keep a vigil on this mound. Day in and day out, people would wonder. And he also had he had cannons up there along with rifles. So he had basically turned his part of the college into a fortress. And he would shoot the cannons from time to time, and to the chagrin of the townspeople, Hannibal, they did not like that. But he was a very paranoid guy. He was getting worse and worse in his old age. Almost schizophrenic, I guess you would say. He thought that the school was going to be attacked by outsiders like competing schools or religious fanatics, or even the public at large. He even started to wear brass plates under his garments in case somebody would, I guess, try to assassinate him. All kinds of stuff. By the way, the school was the first medical school founded west of the Mississippi River, and looking ahead, it helped create the Washington University School of Medicine, so it was quite remarkable. Now, in the 1840s, as we know, the use of cadavers was still highly uncommon and frowned upon here in the United States. But it was during that time, the teaching at the medical school, where he also required his students, he made them steal bodies as part of your graduation. If you didn't steal a body, you were not going to graduate. So finally there would be an incident that got everybody up in arms, and a woman went missing. She was last seen walking a few blocks from the medical college, and one of the witnesses, there was a witness who said that they had seen her and her clothing near the school. So within days you had 200 to 400 people, led mostly by German immigrants from here in St. Louis, storming the school. And they were not going away. The crowd demanded to search the premises for the evidence of Mrs. Walters' murder. That was her name. So McDowell eventually agreed to not let the crowd in, but let Mr. Walters come in to have a look. And he looked and he looked, and he could not find any evidence that she was there. Of course, it was all alleged, and guess what? 2 months later, she was found living in a nearby city with another guy. So they all went away. But there was a second incident that happened, similar kind of thing. A woman gets grave robbed. She had passed from a rare disease, and old Joseph, he could not pass that up. No way. He had to see, he had to find, he had to get. So same thing happened. They came, they said, she's here, where is she? And this time they didn't wait around, they stormed the school. And what did McDowell do? From, I guess, a vision that he had seen from a specter of his mother that had persuaded him, in case something like that happens, to, hey, disguise yourself as a body. So that's what he did. He laid down on the table, he put a sheet over himself as the crowd swarmed in, looking, now how they would not look under the sheet, I don't know, but they passed by, and he got away with it. And they also found no evidence of the woman's corpse there, so, well, he was never caught red-handed, but it was common knowledge that he and his medical students were exhuming bodies. I mean, everyone knew it was going on. So later he became known as I said, the Mad Doctor. Didn't seem to hurt his career, though, because during the onset of the Civil War, he became the Surgeon General of the Confederate Army of the West. And he was Confederate, you know, he was clearly on that side of the equation. But when he tried to take all his guns and small arms and get them to the Confederates, the Union intercepted and they got those guns. And if that's not bad enough, they took over his college and they destroyed the place. They kicked him out of there. So he was on the wrong side of the equation. Well, when he got back from wherever he was, he tried to rebuild the college. I mean, it was a shell of its former self. But he did one really weird thing. He had a room that in the basement that he would call hell. And he had an effigy of Abraham Lincoln on a noose hanging from a gallows. And it was painted black. Like that was his outlet. So I guess later on when he died and everything went to hell, it was occupied by a lot of critters like snakes, crows, and I guess an alligator. I didn't know there's alligators around here, but maybe back then. But that's what it was said. So when he died, they all were buried here. And he was buried in an unmarked grave along with, I believe, his family. And this is the spot right here. Now, this is a new stone that was provided by the university. But this is where they are buried. There are no other markings here but this. Let's take a look here. It's a beautiful stone. Joseph Nash McDowell, surgeon, it says, 1805 to 1868, founder of the Missouri Medical College. So I'm sure if you go there, you're going to see his picture. And there's a symbol here that's very interesting. So there it is, the family's here, all here together the way he wanted it, but not preserved in alcohol. He ended up dying from pneumonia, that's what took him. And this grave did not get marked until the 1940s. This stone here is more recent, I believe. So we wish Joseph and his family to a remarkable person in history, and hopefully they're all resting in peace here. All right, everybody, I am headed out, It's been raining off and on. We got kind of lucky here, so I am gonna get back in the car and head back to Chicago, just like last week, Groundhog Day. All right, I'll catch you guys later, and as always, be safe.